I don't know what that was, but that was my greeting. Hello! We are here with an Eddie Munson fanfiction, and I hear you guys. I'm sorry. I wasn't paying attention. A lot of you guys wanted more Steve Harrington, but I was like, I had a Stranger Things scratch, and the Eddie fanfictions are so good, and I was reading them. I just hit my fan. And I was reading them, and I was like, oh my gosh, I love this. So I had to ask, and the author was like, yes, and then they let me read it, so I'm so happy. I hope you guys don't mind. I'm sorry. I have a Stranger Things scratch, though. Like, itch. I just been craving Stranger Things content, and I can't find a lot of Stranger Things content on YouTube, so I think I'm going to have to, step in a bit. I think I'm going to have to get in here and start recording some more Stranger Things stuff, because you guys have been digging Steve. Finally, come on now. We love Babysitter Steve. We love him. We're gonna get into this. Make sure to go support the author, because we love authors in this community. The link to this fanfiction is in the description below, as well as the music, and I hope you guys enjoy. I really had fun making this one. It took a couple of days. It was longer than I expected it to be, reading it out loud, but it was fun. So, we're just gonna hop in, and I'll see you at the end, guys. Bye! And with a swipe of its claws, the dragon sends the mighty Sir Ode crashing to the floor unconscious. The dragon turns, its frosty eyes drawn to its last remaining adversary. The incomparable sorceress, Eudora Ulwick. Now, Eudora, the fate of the party lies in your hands. What's your move? All eyes at the table turned to Star with rapid interest. The season had been running for several hours now, and after stumbling across what transpired to be an ancient white dragon, the party's characters had been drawn into a grueling, savage battle that had already cost several lives. Oh god, what do I do? Star said anxiously, looking to the rest of the party for help. Eddie leaned back in his seat, a satisfied smirk on his lips as he watched the panic unfold in front of him. The room erupted into shouts from every direction, each person throwing their own opinion and advice into the mix as Star struggled to keep up with them all. Go for the attack, Star! Yeah, it's low hit points. No, you got to heal someone. You need backup. No, she doesn't. She's got a 7th level spell slot left, you moron. Revive me. You need the protection of a cleric. Quiet. Eddie's voice rose above the cacophony of noise, hands held up to silence everyone else as he fixed Star with an encouraging look. It's the lady's choice. Let her make it. Star took a deep breath, studying the spellcasting section of her character's sheet before her nervously. Although it was already in its 6th session, the campaign was still Star's first, so she wasn't quite as confident in her actions as the rest of the party who had been playing Dungeons & Dragons for years. She initially only agreed to join Hellfire as a one-off favor for Lucas, but after discovering that it was actually a hell of a lot of fun, perhaps in part due to the charismatic dungeon master whose smile made her heart race, she had asked to join as an official member. Star knew she hadn't exactly been the strongest player so far. In spite of that, she always enjoyed herself and gave it her all during sessions, although she sometimes made silly decisions purely down to her inexperience. That hadn't mattered too much so far though, save for the disastrous encounter with the Mimic the previous week. But now, with everyone else's characters incapacitated or unconscious, the fate of the entire campaign rested on her shoulders. Star cast her eyes up to Eddie, who, despite still sitting back with his arms folded cockily, gave her a reassuring nod, eyes boring into hers. Her heart hammered under his intense watch, and she stood up from her chair with a steely determination, gaze unwavering as she pointed a finger at him for added effect. I cast Finger of Death! The party burst out into divided cries, half delighted and half horrified at Star's decision. Dustin gave her a double thumbs up, but their cleric, Garrett, smacked a hand to his forehead in exasperation. Star looked back to Eddie, who grinned madly, sitting forward in his seat eagerly. Finger of Death, eh, Star? Well, we'll have to see if that hits, won't we? Make the saving throw, Munson, she replied shrewdly, leaning across the table to stare him down. Eddie chuckled at her, clearly entertained by Star's newfound confidence, before standing and grabbing the D20, tossing it casually onto the table in front of him. The party stood with bated breaths, waiting for the die to come to a halt behind the Dungeon Master's screen. The room went silent as the telltale clattering of the die came to an end after what felt like an age. Eddie's gaze left the table to cast a brief glance at Star. Her eyes were wide, anxious and hopeful as one hand gripped Lucas's arm tightly. He hesitated before breaking out into a bellowing cry, hand clutching his heart as he stumbled back into his chair dramatically, playing the part of the slain dragon. That's a hit, Star. Ugh. The room instantly erupted in cheers, the younger teens running to hug Star as she jumped up and down in elation, finally feeling as though she had proven her worth and was deserving of her place at the table. "Oh my god, I did it!" she said breathlessly, mouth hanging open in shock as though she couldn't quite bring herself to believe it. She caught Eddie's gaze over Lucas's shoulder, and he bowed his head to her, a dazzling smile on his face as he did so. "Great job, Star." Once the celebration died down, the party began to pack their belongings away, Star unable to keep from beaming as she tucked her character sheet neatly away in her bag. Dustin wandered past her towards Eddie, awarding him praise for the latest game. "That was an awesome session, dude. I love the..." "Hey, you only rolled an 18. Dustin's innocent statement seemed to ring out above the rest of the commotion, and Star froze over her bag, listening carefully to his next words. "Shut up, Henderson," Eddie warned in a lower voice, shifting nervously as Mike joined him and Dustin at the head of the table, trying to get a glimpse of the die in question. "But you only needed a 15 to win the saving throw. You beat Star's spell with an 18. What?" The girl in question's head whipped up to the pair, looking at Eddie questioningly. "Is that true?" She moved to snatch the DM screen away to reveal the die, but he was too quick, grabbing the offending object before she could see the true result of his roll. "Eddie!" she said, affronted. If anything, his defensive reaction had proven Dustin's words to be true. Star stood gawking at him, disbelieving. Why would he lie about a roll, especially when it was to his own detriment? Eddie was nothing if not a fastidious dungeon master. He followed the rules to a fault and certainly never gave them any advantages during the game. In fact, he was incredibly strict and had never hesitated to kill off an entire party mid-campaign before. "What's going on?" she demanded, hands coming to rest on the table as she stared down at him angrily. "Did you lie to let me win?" Eddie grew flustered as his eyes shifted to the other Hellfire members, attempting to completely avoid Stars. "No, of course not," he protested, trying to laugh it off, but it was without any of his usual confidence and only furthered Star's suspicions. Eddie didn't get flustered. Ever. He was lying. "Dustin, tell me the truth. What did he roll?" Star rounded the table towards the teen, coming to stand before him with her hands on her hips in what she hoped was her most menacing pose. Come on, Star, does it really matter? We won, didn't we?" Dustin looked between the pair, unwilling to rat out Eddie, who he completely idolized, but also not having the guts to barefaced lie to Star, who was visibly upset. He had never seen her get angry at someone before, but she was downright furious with Eddie. "Of course it matters! I don't want to win just because Mr. High and Mighty Dungeons Master over here thinks I'm some stupid little girl that he needs to go easy on. Gotta dumb things down for me, right, Eddie?" Star had always felt as though Eddie had treated her differently to the rest of the party. He'd never gone so far as cheating to help her before, at least not that she knew of, but he often held back on the usual sarcastic and judgmental remarks that the rest of the party received. It wasn't that he never teased her, but there was a marked difference between how he treated her and the boys. His quips didn't hold the same bite when he spoke to her, They always seemed a little restrained, whereas he had no problem tearing into the boys when they made a mistake. Star had never really thought much into it before, chalking it up to the fact that he was just more familiar with the others. But with the proof in front of her that the otherwise stickler for the rules, Eddie Munson, had faked a role in her favor, made her mind whirl trying to figure out why. Did he think she was stupid? That the game was too complicated for her to properly understand? Was he fed up with the lousy moves she kept making? She admittedly made some bad plays in the past. Maybe he felt like he had to make up for it so the rest of the team wouldn't have to suffer the consequences of her foolish actions. Star felt a hot flash of embarrassment run through her, feeling humiliated. She just celebrated with everyone, feeling on top of the world with the knowledge that she'd finally been an asset to the party. But it was just a lie. She was still as useless as ever, and had cost them the entire campaign. Jeff and Garrett avoided catching her eye completely, and the others just watched her with pity. Star bristled, snatching up her bag and flinging it over her shoulder as she marched towards the door, stopping only to fix Eddie with an icy glare. "I quit." The party watched her retreating back as she stormed from the room, the door slamming behind her, leaving utter silence in its wake. All eyes turned slowly to Eddie, who sat frozen in his seat, for once in his life lost for words. He felt guilty for lying to the team about the role, but mostly he was taken aback at Star's reaction. He hadn't intended to upset her. It was just that, ever since she joined Hellfire, she had rubbish luck with her roles, so he'd wanted to give her a first win. Especially after he had witnessed how anxious and invested in the game she was. He just couldn't help himself. Not that he'd ever admit it to the guys, but he was totally hooked on Star. During their D&D session, he found himself increasingly obsessed with finding things to do or say that would get her to smile or laugh at him. His stomach doing somersaults anytime she'd give him her undivided attention. It was completely pathetic, really. He, Eddie Munson, hardcore metalhead and leader of the Hellfire Club, feeling what could only be described as giddy over a girl. And cheating at D&D! It was unheard of. He seriously needed to pull himself together. "Now you've really gone and blown it," Dustin exhaled loudly, shaking his head at his friend. "Yes, thank you, Henderson, for your keen observation." Eddie rubbed his palms into his eyes, frustrated as he tried to figure out where things had gone quite so wrong. "Sorry, gentlemen, for casting doubt on the integrity of the campaign. You can rest assured it won't happen again." "Don't worry about it, dude. I'd let her win too if I was trying to bang her." Jeff piped up from behind him, and Eddie instantly jumped to his feet, poking a finger in Jeff's chest angrily. "Hey, don't talk about Star like that, man. It's not like that." Jeff held his hands up in surrender, mumbling an apology as he backed away from him. "You think you should go talk to her or something?" Lucas said hesitantly, not wanting to elicit another outburst from their DM. His words seemed to bring Eddie back to reality. "Shit, right?" He nodded, cramming the rest of his Hellfire equipment into his bag haphazardly before taking off after Star. "Star, where are you going?" Eddie reached her just as she was exiting the school, the dim streetlights the only thing illuminating her form on the otherwise dark evening. "Home," she replied tersely, avoiding looking at him as she continued her path out of the school grounds. "Well, you're going the wrong way. The van's back there," he said with a nervous laugh, throwing a thumb over his shoulder to gesture at his van that sat across the parking lot. It was customary for Eddie to give Star a ride home after Hellfire. After getting caught on her bike in a torrential downpour following her first session, he'd insisted that she couldn't take the risk again, even if there was a noticeable absence of clouds in the sky. "No, I'm not. I'm walking." "You can't walk home, Star. Not at this time," he shouted after her, a vain attempt to get her to stop. "Yes, I can. I don't need you to do everything for me." She huffed out pointedly, picking up her pace to break into a light jog as she ignored Eddie's calls from behind her, heading towards the street. Star hadn't made it far down the main road before she heard the rattling of a familiar vehicle pull up beside her. Eddie's van visible just out of the corner of her eye. Still refusing to acknowledge his presence, she continued walking with her head held high, eyes set straight ahead of her. Eddie ran his van alongside Star as she walked swiftly down the road, half leaning out the window to plead with her. "Come on, Star, I can't let you walk home alone," he begged, trying to lighten the tone with his next words. "You never know what kind of monsters might be lurking out there in the woods." When in doubt, Eddie always turned to cracking jokes, finding that his offbeat sense of humor usually did the trick in de-escalating situations. To his dismay, it didn't seem to be working with Star. "And I wouldn't stand a chance against them, would I?" Her eyes flashed dangerously as she finally stopped walking and turned to acknowledge him. "Silly old Star doesn't even know how to play a stupid board game, let alone walk herself home, right?" Eddie sighed, hanging his head remorsefully. "I'm sorry, Star," he said earnestly. "Will you just get in the van, please?" Star eyed the road ahead of her, envisioning the long walk that she knew was in store. Unfortunately for her, and unbeknownst to Eddie, she did know the kind of monsters that lurked in the woods of Hawkins. She knew them all too well. A shiver ran up her spine at the thought, and she let out a bitter sigh, rounding the front of the van and throwing open the passenger side door with unnecessary force. "Fine, but this doesn't change anything." The drive to Star's house was awkward, to say the least. Eddie knew that he needed to apologize, and he desperately wanted to, but he wasn't entirely sure how to put it into words. "Hey, Star, did you know I only let you win because I fancied the pants off you? Yeah, and that little pout you do when you lose, it makes me want to jump across the table and kiss you so hard you see stars." "Nope, that would never work." "Do you think I'm stupid?" Star's voice interrupted his inner turmoil, and he cast a quick glance over at her, watching as she hung her head, fingers playing with the hem of her skirt. Despite the situation, he found it hard to concentrate on the road ahead, his gaze drifting to her fingers and the bare skin of her thighs that lay beneath them. "What?" Eddie seemed genuinely surprised at Star's words, all the improper thoughts of the soft, inviting skin of her legs leaving his mind rapidly. "Is that why you let me win? Because I'm rubbish at D&D and you felt sorry for me? I might not be the best, but it's my first campaign and I'm trying. I know I've made some really stupid moves, but I don't think you're stupid." He cut across her, disheartened that he'd made her feel that way. His voice was softer than usual as he continued. "Actually, I think you're kind of awesome." It was true. There was a reason why Eddie had been so eager to accept Star into Hellfire as a permanent member. He'd be the first to admit that he'd initially questioned why the preppy-looking girl had agreed to sub in for Lucas. With her soft pink skirt and fluffy white cardigan, she was in complete contrast to him and the rest of the party, visibly out of place at the table. But he, of all people, should have known not to judge a book by its cover. Star was immediately invested in the campaign, coming prepared with a detailed character sheet and hanging on to his every word as he described the scenes before them, taking notes of the little hints and clues that he'd purposefully let slip in a notebook reserved especially for the occasion. Where he would usually grill new members, Eddie suddenly found himself unable to. Taken aback by her innocent, enthusiastic smile and the way her eyes lit up as she surveyed the table, complimenting the detail of the map and miniatures that he'd spent far too long setting up. He didn't know how Sinclair knew the high school senior or had managed to get her to join them, but he had made a mental note to thank the kid for turning to the so-called dark side and requiring a sub to fill his place. Star was radiant, so full of energy and kind-hearted that it was hard not to get drawn in by her. What made it worse is that she was so damn pretty too. Despite knowing that she was way out of his league and that he was everything she should stay away from, Eddie found himself addicted to her. Addicted to her infectious laugh, glowing smile, and sparkling eyes. And he was especially addicted to the way that she watched him during their D&D sessions, attention solely on him, captivated by every word that he said. It was even better when he had her all to himself after the session, even if it was just for the small amount of time it took to drive her home. To begin with, they mostly spoke about the campaign, but as time drew on, he found their conversations progressing past D&D to anything and everything. Their interests, hobbies, hopes and dreams, and their futures. Star had even shown interest in the music he liked, although he was certain that it wasn't really her thing at all. She'd tap her foot along to whatever cassette he happened to have on that day, and he took notice of the tracks she seemed to prefer. Usually it was the less thrashy ones, songs like Fairies Wear Boots and Rainbow in the Dark, and she definitely wasn't keen on Anthrax tunes. But regardless, she always asked questions about his music, and seemed genuinely interested in the answer he gave. Kind of awesome didn't do her justice at all, but then what words could? Really? Star's voice faltered at his words, giddy at the compliment, but wondering where on earth it had come from and just what he meant by it. Eddie nodded with a nervous smile, but his confession just served to confuse her further. Then why did you lie about the role? It was getting late, he shrugged, hoping she couldn't see through his lies. I knew Harrington would be there to pick the kids up, so I had to wrap things up anyway. Bullshit. Eddie was taken aback by Star's ferocity, although completely unsurprised that she had read him like an open book. That's never stopped you before, she pressed on. You're lying to me, and made me feel like shit. The way Jeff and Garrett looked at me, they think I'm a total moron. I didn't mean to make you feel like shit, Star. And the guys don't think you're a moron. Yes, they do. I've seen the way they look at me, like I don't belong in Hellfire. I bet you're all fed up with how I keep screwing up your amazing campaign. You're not screwing up anything. They're experienced players. It's all good fun when things go a bit wrong, and you have to think on your feet. Eddie responded honestly, taking note to have a word with Jeff and Garrett before their next session. Then why did you do it? Just tell me the truth! Star cried, at a loss of why Eddie seemed to be avoiding answering her question truthfully. Because I'm crazy about you, Star! Jesus Christ! A frustrated yell burst from his chest as he slammed on the brakes, bringing the van to a sudden halt at the side of the road. A long silence followed, and Eddie brought a hand up to run over his face. Sorry. I like you, alright? Really like you. So I wanted you to win. I saw how upset you were after you messed up last week, and I thought it'd make you happy if you won this time. Oh. Star replied in a small voice, words failing her as her heart hammered out her chest at Eddie's confession. Yeah, and for the record, I don't think you're stupid at all. Although I won't defend your decision to enter hand-to-hand combat with the Mimic last week. You're a magic user, for Christ's sake. Eddie found himself unable to stop from filling the silence, rambling to prolong the inevitable moment when Star would reject him. She laughed, her hands coming up to cover her face in embarrassment. Oh God. I knew it was a shitty move as soon as I made it. I just panicked. I get so into the game I can never think clearly. That's good. It means you're really in the moment. And having someone that's so invested makes me feel like I'm doing a great job as a DM, you know? You are a great DM. Except for when you cheat, that is. Hey, you can't blame me for wanting to cheer up the fair maiden, can you? He grinned cheekily, shooting her a wink that made her stomach flip. Eddie, she stated hesitantly, can we go back to when you said that you liked me? Eddie swallowed, the confident mask he wore slipping away once more. He hadn't intended to practically shout a confession of his affections at her the way he had. But now that the proverbial cat was out of the bag, there was no taking it back. He felt vulnerable, uncharacteristically nervous as he fixed his eyes on the road ahead of him, preparing for her to turn him down gently. After all, they were complete opposites. What would someone like Star see in him? "Sorry if I made you uncomfortable," he apologized, preempting the impending rejection. "We can just forget I ever—" "You didn't!" Star's hand shot out to grab his forearm, which was still resting on the steering wheel, despite the van remaining stationary. Eddie's eyes darted down to it before meeting hers again as she quickly snatched her arm back, suddenly shy. "You didn't make me uncomfortable, I mean." "I didn't?" "No, and I don't want to just forget about what you said." "You don't?" He felt like a parrot repeating her words dumbly, unable to fully believe the scene unfolding before him. "No," she affirmed coyly, ducking her head to hide her bashful smile. "I mean, why do you think I agreed to join Hellfire in the first place?" "I thought it might have been the bitchin' t-shirts," he smirked, confidence amplifying as Star laughed at him, shaking her head. "Oh, it was definitely the t-shirts. Nothing to do with the cute DM," she agreed, giving him a wink of her own and reveling in the way he became flustered, choking out a nervous laugh. Eddie could have sworn that his heart stopped at that moment. Like, actually stopped dead. "Speaking of t-shirts, you still haven't had one printed for me yet." And there was the pout, the one he tried to avoid so hard by letting her win the game. Truthfully, he hadn't considered that Star would actually want one. It wasn't often that people, especially people like her, wanted to be visibly associated with the Hellfire freaks. Yet again, she was full of surprises. Eddie found himself answering Star before he had time to process his thoughts, distracted by thoughts of her lips and just how exactly he planned on wiping that torturous pout from them. "You can always wear mine." There was a beat of silence, and he thought for a moment that he'd taken things too far. But then Star swept her gaze over him, cocking her head to the side as she watched his reaction to her next words through her lashes. "I think I'll take you up on that offer." Eddie knew he was done for when she bit her lip, eyeing his Hellfire t-shirt shamelessly. He exhaled shakily, hesitating under her gaze and giving her a once-over just as she'd done to him, before deciding to live dangerously. "You wanna go back to my place to try it on?" Eddie felt like the devil corrupting her. Maybe everyone was right when they called him a bad influence, but with the look Star was giving him, he wasn't so sure if it wasn't the other way around. She fixed him with a wicked grin, and he swallowed, suddenly feeling as though he was on the back foot, like he was about to pay for his prior actions. "I'll need to roll a charisma check for that, Munson. And no cheating this time."